Hello everyone, it's Cheryl Zwalji again from Astral Connections, and here with me I have John Running Deer. John considers himself a prophet of earth changes. I consider him a seer, a healer, and many other things. I met John last year when he gave a presentation here on earth changes, and at that time we didn't have the opportunity to interview him, and we're very happy to have him here today. Thank you, John, for joining us.
I'm very happy to be here, and thank you so much for helping me to get out the information on my earth changes.
Absolutely, it's something that needs to be done, so we need to get it out there. So before we go into the earth changes and we go into the idea of the prophecy and where it came from, let's talk about you a little bit and tell us a little bit about you. Maybe even start as early as where you grew up and what your life was like and what led you to this field.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I grew up on Shinnecock Indian Reservation in Long Island, New York.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a little two-room schoolhouse there. And then when I went to high school in the town of Southampton, you know, those rich people in the town, in the Hamptons, I found out that I was better at history and geography than anybody in any of my classes. And I astounded people there with that. So I continued with learning history and geography. Any book I can pick up on with maps and history and geography of the world, even though it's changing so fast.
So you specifically focus on mapology in that sense? Okay.
Yes. And when I was growing up, my elders used to tell me things and they'd say, remember this. Like part of it was the earth changes. And part of it was the ecology of the world. And
so how old were you when they were
when I was 10, 12, 14, in my very young age. And when I started doing my maps, some of my people said, oh, I remember my grandmother saying that, but I didn't believe her. And I said, well, you see it here now, so you must know that she was telling you something you should have listened to.
Right.
But most people don't listen, and they don't think about the things that are happening around them. It's just something, well, it happened. No, it didn't happen. It happened for a reason. And my reason for showing the earth changes and doing the maps that I did was to let people know that these things are happening so they can see it in plain black and white, so to speak, and they'll understand why some of the things they're seeing is going to happen or did happen.
Can you give me an example of some of the things the elders shared with you at such a young age that they asked you to remember? Was it in plain English, or was it in poetry, or how did you?
It was in plain English to tell me that the East Coast was going to suffer big changes. The land was going to disappear and be covered by water, and we could see that within my between my teenagers and my adulthood. I saw those changes.
Right.
And they just told me to remember it, and every time I'd see something, I'd say, that's what they were talking about.
Right. And so, now, did they receive this information from some kind of writing, scripture, or was this visions they had, or were they? That
I don't know, because I was a child, and they were the adults, and they were the leaders and the teachers, and so we didn't question where they got their information from. And if they told us to remember it, we knew it was something they wanted us to remember, to pass on.
Okay, so I imagine your studies then took you into geography, probably.
Mm-hmm. Geography, history, archaeology, anthropology, all of that mapped together to bring out this information.
So give us a little bit of a history of that time of your life when you were in university or in your profession. What did you do?
In my profession, after I became an adult?
Yeah.
Well, I went in the military after 4 years of
What
flying.
was your role in the military?
I was a crew member on heavy bombers during the Korean War.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
And when I got out, I went back to school because I wanted to be an electronic engineer. And then I worked for 35 years in the mechanical engineering, mostly in the military field. But all the time that I was doing that, I was finding books, finding information. I had this information, 40 years ago, and I just talked to people about it. I didn't, and finally I decided I was going to do the maps, because trying to tell people, they didn't understand. They say, oh, you're a prophet of doom, every time you say something. And I told them, no, it's not doom, it's telling you that things are going to happen, so you should be prepared to move or to be out of this way, otherwise you're going to die.
Right.
So when I did my maps and showed it to some of my people, they say, oh, that's what you've been telling us about for 20 years.
Because I guess visually they saw
They
it
can
better
see it.
than...
Exactly, that's why I did the maps.
So, now, in regards to the maps, have you received visions or dreams, or how did this information develop and come to you? Or was it just from what you learned with your adults?
A combination of all.
Okay.
And the things that I put down on my maps, most of it came from visions. And it just, that I knew things, but I didn't know how, or I didn't know when, and vision showed me how and when, in many cases. And what totally was going to happen. But a lot of it came from studying, and the information came together when Spirit showed me things. Like on one of my maps, they showed me, on my world map, they showed the whole Middle East being underwater. And I said, hey, guys, what? That's a lot of land. That's a lot of people going to be lost. Why? And they said, because the people are bad. They're always fighting. They can't get along. So we're going to take the land away, and they won't have anything to fight about.
Wow.
So this is coming straight from the spirit world. Has been trying to tell Earthlings, stop doing the things you're doing. You're destroying the planet. You're destroying each other, and that's not the way to live.
So what point in your life did this communication with the spirit beings start?
It started when I was about 30.
Okay.
It came in little drips and drabs when I was younger, but I wasn't paying attention to it, I guess you might say.
And what made you pay attention to it?
They smacked me in the head.
And how did they do that?
They smacked me in the head. Listen, dummy, they said.
So basically, if you don't listen,
if I don't listen,
you're going to get smacked in the
again.
head.
That's right.
Okay, so last time you were here, I remember you had maps of 2015 and 2025?
2015 and 2075.
2075, sorry.
It's all right. The 2015 map is of the world showing the changes that will come, not on 2012, but 2015 to 2020.
Right.
When
Yes,
I think the Earth is going to shift on its axis, and we'll find ourselves in a different part of the hemisphere, different hemisphere, and we're going to be in a warmer climate. But the Earth is not only going to shift on its axis, it's going to change its rotation.
Now, you shared this information in Knowledge Network or National Geographic or somewhere, if I recall correctly. Can you share a little bit about that? Like, what brought that on?
Oh, with NBC was doing a program called Ancient Prophecies, and they contacted me due to a man who is a very astute student of Nostradamus, and he told them if they needed somebody to talk about the Earth change, they should contact me. So they contacted me, and they said, well, what, how do we know that you're the real deal?
Right.
And I said, this week they're in California, and I said, there's a major earthquake coming, a 7.5. And I said, if it happens early in the week, it'll be in LA or farther north as the week goes on. So they said, okay, and they checked, and that earthquake came, and I said, it will end off the coast of San Francisco. and it ended off the coast of San Francisco. It didn't destroy any inland sea. They said, okay, we want to talk to you.
Right. So tell us about what you shared with them then.
Well, then I shared, well, it's on my video, but it's also on NBC's program, Ancient Prophecies, where I showed them what the East Coast would look like, what the West Coast would look like, the center of the country around the New Madrid Fault, and the fact that the Great Lakes, according to Edgar Casey also, that the Great Lakes will be emptied into the Gulf of Mexico.
Right.
And this is all part of the changes that are coming,
Right.
and we should be preparing for it.
Right. Okay, so when you shared the information with them about the earthquake, how did you receive that information, or how did you know that that was going to happen?
Spirit gave it to me through a vision.
Okay.
And I've had a number of visions about earthquakes, especially in the West Coast. And I've even called friends when they were there and told them to get out of the way or move out of the buildings when the quakes came, because the buildings would shake.
Right.
And they were very appreciative of it.
Right. Okay. Now, something like Earth changes and knowing these things, and NBC knowing that you know these things, didn't they inform some higher power that, you know?
Well, they did it with the program that they put out.
Okay.
And there were other people on the program that talked about other things, and they were quite good and quite accurate.
Okay.
So they put the information out. Most people don't want to hear it.
So, is there a team somewhere that hunts down this kind of change that's going to occur on the Earth scientifically, that the prophets and the scientists get together and communicate? I guess that's wishful thinking.
Yeah, wishful thinking is right, because they're stuck in their own old, how do we put it, the old ways, the old thinking, that everything is just the way the old one said, the old teachers or the old professors, the things that they learned in college. For instance, Greenland. I put in my map a inland sea in there, and I took it to some geologists when they were at a college near me, and they said, nah, that's not right. Greenland's a solid mass. There's no lake there. I said, okay, maybe I'm wrong. A couple of years ago, when the countries were checking the melting of the ice because of this so-called global warming, they wanted to see how thick the ice was on Greenland, and they measured it with a laser and found out that that lake was there.
Wow.
And then I remembered, oh, wait a minute, I have a globe. I went and got the globe. It was done by National Geographic in 1958. It was called a World Geological Survey, where they showed the underground mountains in the oceans. They showed in pictorial view all the major fault lines and the fault lines across under the oceans and under the continents. And in that, they showed this inland sea in Greenland. So these people who say, no, it wasn't there, they didn't check with the people nowadays who are doing things. They're going by what the old professors told them about how civilization started 6,000 years ago in the Tigris-Euphrates Valley. And we know there were civilizations long before that on this continent, I mean on this planet. So they're just relying on what they were taught in college by some antiquated professor who liked to think he knew everything, and he didn't know hardly anything.
Now, you mentioned Nostradamus, you mentioned Edgar Casey. How intently did you study their prophecies?
Both, very intently.
And you find parallels and consistencies in everything.
Yes, and a lot of the information. Well, I mentioned the Great Lakes emptying into the Gulf of Mexico is what Casey had in one of his writings. And I used to go down to the ARE Institute down in Virginia Beach and study some of his writings, and it all started coming together.
Wow. How about NASA? Have you communicated these things with
NASA
anybody?
NASA doesn't want to hear anything. I even communicated with the people at Woods Hole up in Massachusetts. They have a side scan radar, and I asked, I knew people there. I didn't know the people that go out on the ships to do this. I asked them to speak to them and ask them if they would go, when they go out past Long Island and they're looking south, I said to turn on their radars and see if the land masses that I'm talking about that has mountains on the north end of it, if they can see anything. They wouldn't do it.
Right.
But I talked to submariners that go out of Norfolk area, and they tell me they have to, when they go offshore, back during the Cold War, they would deep dive so that the Russians wouldn't know where they were going. And they were telling me that they had to come up as they started northeast. And I said, why? They said, well, the mountains are in the way. I'm saying, don't you guys know there's no land out there? How can there be mountains in the way? Just shows to go you that the school system now doesn't teach these people geography or history or anything, so they don't know.
Right.
But all they knew was those ships, the submarines had to come up because the mountains were in the way.
So you said you joined the military and you worked there. Did you explore any of these subjects there?
No, I didn't explore any of them there because I was just too busy living. You know, when you're in the service, you're a wild kid, you know, you finish flying, you finish a mission, you go back, you go in town, you have fun. Wasn't thinking of any of those things. It wasn't until after I got out of the military and was in school, you know, studying again, then I not only did my school studies, but I went back into the history and books on mythology and geology and all that.
What compelled you to do that?
I just had an interest in that, interest in learning it.
And so, do they have copies of your maps?
Who?
The powers that be?
Oh,
those
some
who-
of the
the scientists, some of the...
Some of them do. When I go places, I give copies to some of these people. A very good one was what's his name? Ivor Joe Fisher from Channel 2 in New York. He was a meteorologist, and I was over there once and I gave him a copy of my maps. And he looked at them and I said, hey, if anything happens, I'll call you. Right? So the big tsunami that hit Indonesia, and I called him, he wasn't there, and his secretary knew who I was, and she said, leave him a voicemail. So I left him a voicemail. I said, hey, Joe, check my 2015 map on Indonesia. It showed the whole area underwater. And I did that 6 years before it happened. So, you know, it's there. The information is there. A lot of as I said, those geologists that told me that Greenland was a solid mass, they don't want to hear it because it interferes with their way of thinking and their knowledge and their teachings. What they learned, they want to pass it on, but they're passing on erroneous information, and they don't want to hear that either.
So these changes are to begin occurring in 2015?
Sometime around there or even before.
Right.
But you can't pinpoint it. But if you look at the East Coast now, they're calling it global warming. It isn't really global warming as much as it is. The East Coast is anchored, but as it pulls away, more of the land mass goes down and it'll sink down.
So what about North America?
Going to be broken up badly.
It's going to be broken up badly? What about this lower mainland?
Here too, when the plates off the coast, when they start moving, and as the west coast plate goes down and dives under the Pacific plate that comes up, it'll push up and cause tsunamis and cause earthquakes. And when the all the number of volcanoes that you have out here on the East Coast, starting down in California and working all the way up to Mount Baker. All of these volcanoes are within 1 or 1.5 degrees of each other. When I flew up here this time, the aircraft flew right along the line from Mount Jefferson to Mount Baker, and all those are right in line.
And they weren't before?
No, they are.
They are.
They are, which says that they're on a fault line.
Right, and
With-
so they're in the
magma, where the magma pressure will come up,
Okay.
and if it comes up in one, it'll come up in
in
all
all
of
of them.
them. The eruption of Mount St. Helens was just a prelude to what will happen. And there was a native prophecy about the volcanoes here in the West Coast, and it says that when the maiden gets mad because the brothers are fighting over her, then she will blow her top. And when the big brother gets mad at the younger brothers for causing that problem, he'll blow his top. In the meantime, the other two, that's Mount Adams and Mount Hood, are the younger brothers. Mount Rainier is the big brother. And in the meantime, the grandfather, who is Mount Baker, will blow his top, and all those volcanoes will go off and cause that major disaster.
Wow. It's very interesting.
And that's an old ancient prophecy of the native people in this area.
So anything occurring that you know of in the immediate future?
Immediate future. We're undergoing now a shifting of the continents. The continents are always moving west. Africa's moving, pulling Asia off its balance. The West Coast is not moving, so the East Coast is pushing into the Mississippi, which is a huge fault line, and the New Madrid Fault, and the land masses are going to do this, and when it does that, the whole area in the center of the country around the Mississippi, around the New Madrid Fault, is going to blow very badly.
Right.
What happened in 1812, 1813, the New Madrid Fault blew, and it rang bells in Boston and Savannah, Georgia. That's how much it shook the planet, the country.
So what's the positive side to all this?
Know what's happening, know to move out of the way, because it's not a doom and gloom, like I said. It's just a natural progression of the Earth. The Earth is changing all the time, and the planet is changing, and if man doesn't change with it, he's going to be lost.
So what advice do you have then for anyone, anywhere?
Stop destroying the planet, that's number one. Because in my maps I showed areas that are going to be lost, and most of those areas are oil producing areas. What it's telling me is that the planet does not want
Its resources
petroleum and to be depleted, because petroleum ruins the ecology, and they want man to stop ruining the ecology.
Right. Any advice to anyone on the lower mainland here?
No, just be prepared to move when the earthquakes start coming. And
Interesting.
stop hanging on to this is mine, this is mine, this is my things, this is my things. That's what's wrong with most people. They refuse to hear, they don't want to hear that they have to move one day. They don't want to hear that this big house they built might be lost. They don't keep a bag packed with necessities for themselves and their children, and have another bag packed with their essentials and their information, all of their insurances and what they need, because they have to move in a hurry.
Right.
There are very few people who are prepared for that.
Right.
But Noah has a radio, and most people should have, or have somebody who has one, because when things start to happen, Noah will alert people. And if they alert you in your area to move, that a quake is coming, that a tsunami is coming, get out. Don't run down to the shore to, let me see the waves coming in, because that wave's going to take you.
Right.
You saw that happen when the tsunami in Japan, the waves came over here, people were running down to the shore in Oregon, and they were swept away. That's not very smart.
Right.
So some of these things we're trying to do is warn people, don't do those things.
Right. Okay. Well, I've exhausted my questions. Is there anything you want to share with us?
Well, as I said, this is not doom and gloom. It's showing people what's happening and what will happen and could happen. So just be prepared to have to get up and leave the area you are. Find a route to get out of these areas, because if it happens right now, all the highways are going to be jammed. Mm-hmm. And if a warning comes, don't sit and wait for other people to leave. You be the first to get out of there. You'll be able to get out of the area.
So then the scientists are on the same page then?
Oh, they are. They know what's going on. They know what's coming. But they're not going to tell people because two things, they don't want to panic them. And businesses don't want bad things told because they want to sell houses, they want to sell land.
Right.
Right. It's all economics and control.
Right. Any interesting military stories before you leave?
Well, since I've been away a week and a half. I haven't seen TV, so I don't even know what's going on in the world. I heard something about Iran is acting up again, but that's not new. That's old news.
No, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Well, thank you, John.
Well,
Thank you so much.
Thank you for giving me the time to explain what
Absolutely,
I'm doing.
it's our pleasure.
And show people
Absolutely.
what is happening and what could happen.
Absolutely.
So when you see things happening, you hear from nowhere, you hear from the scientific community that something is going on, pay attention. Pay attention.
John, before we part here, I want to show your maps on the video. So give me a second while I grab them.
Okay.
Okay, everyone, here's the map we were talking about earlier, and I'm just going to get John to show us what he's talking about.
Okay. What I was talking about was in the Middle East, where all of that is underwater, because Spirit said they're going to take that land away because people are bad and they're always fighting and can't get along. So they're going to take the land away so they won't have anything to fight about. The other thing here is Rift Valley that runs down the western side of Africa, or east side of Africa, excuse me. As West Africa moves, the continent moves, this is going to split this apart. This is all volcanic down through here, and you're going to have major volcanoes, new volcanoes appearing in here. Over here is Indonesia that I spoke of when I told Ira Joe to take a look at it. This is on my map, and my map is 1996, and I think that Indonesia didn't happen until 2004, I believe.
Wow.
So that's a long time. That's 10 years.
Yeah.
It was on there before it happened.
And how about in this area here?
In this area, well, here's the lake in the Inland Sea in
Yeah, that looks a little
Greenland.
different.
Yes, it looks a little bit different. And the east coast is going to be broken up. You'll see there's a series of islands. They're actually large land masses, but on this world map it looks like a series of islands. Here are the islands off the coast of the east coast of Long Island. Those land masses, I believe, are the remnants of the earlier part of Atlantis that went down. That Edgar Casey referred to as Poseidon. And those will appear again, according to
What's your study on Atlantis?
very extensive.
Okay.
That it was
And you
there.
see parallels here as
And I
well.
see parallels with it, yes.
And you definitely believe Atlantis was here.
Oh, well, there's very definite proof. There's proof that Atlantis was here because some of the copper that was used on Atlantis came right from this area. It was the rich red copper that you have in your copper mines up here. And there were red-bearded people who came here and mined this, and they went back out this way, and the ice is broken up now so that you can get through this passage. Well, that was there then because Atlantis was out here,
Right.
and it was warm, so that meant this area was warmer. The poles were somewhere over here, out of the way, and didn't freeze this. This was all open, and these people came and got the copper, went around, went back to Atlantis with it.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Mhm.
And what about, what is that?
This
It looks like,
This-
this looks like land that wasn't there.
This is all the islands up here in northern Canada
Right.
and around near Greenland. There's going to be one landmass later. Because what is happening is as a landmass goes down, it pushes into the magma that's underneath the earth, and as it pushes the magma pushes up land, some land that went down before and some land that's new and is coming
Right.
up. So you'll have new land masses coming up and old land masses
Going
going
down.
Mhm.
Oh, wow.
Because according to the Hopi prophecy, when Atlantis went down, they said the big island to the east, when it went down, the Mississippi Valley came up.
And so we have a prophecy about that.
hmm Yes.
Does it say Mississippi?
The same, it says the land to the east,
Land to the east.
which is the Mississippi Valley, most of the southern parts of the United States, and Oklahoma.
Well, thank you, John.
I thank you for the time,
Thank you.
letting me show people what I think is going to be happening, and there's some proof of it. So when you see things happening, pay attention.
Will do. Thank you.